Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamie Burrow. I'm a 15-year-old campaigner with Teach the Future, and welcome to our event. And thanks so much for coming to our Teach the Future event, where we're going to be launching some brand new research we've been working on, as well as telling you a bit more about our campaign and what we're up to at the moment. A bit later on, we're also going to hear from Larissa Kennedy, the National President of the National Union of Students and President of SOS UK, one of Teach the Future's parent organisations. Later on, we're also going to have some time for a Q&A panel, so please do send in any questions you might have throughout the event using the Q&A function in Zoom. Just so you know, we're hosting this in webinar mode, so while you can see us, we won't be able to see you and you can't see each other. But do ask questions in the Q&A box and ask for any clarifications in the chat box that you should have access to. I'm now delighted to be able to hand over to another Teach the Future campaigner, B, who's going to tell us a bit more about what Teach the Future is and why we're here.
Thank you all for coming this evening. To date, we've received 13,780 signatures on our petition. This is a massive success for us and shows the breadth and strength of public support for our campaign. This evening, we hope to tell you a bit more about our work, how you can support it, and, most excitingly, the launch of some brand new research that we've been working on over the past few months. Let's start by telling you about where Teach the Future began, what we aim to achieve, and what we've achieved so far. As you know, Teach the Future has come on leaps and bounds since our founding in October of 2019, when we had only 10 volunteers, yet 7 asks. We could only have imagined what we, as an organisation, could become, now having been included in 7 party manifestos, having branches in each nation of the UK, meeting with many politicians across the UK, hosting a parliamentary reception, submitting amendments to bills, and so much more. Since I joined Teach the Future in early December of 2020, I have felt empowered and supported to help make a difference, but also inspired and humbled by the perseverance and capabilities of my colleagues. Not only have we been gaining traction politically, but our reach has been significantly widened, with us now having over 144 supporting organisations, 5 parent organisations, including the UK Student Climate Network and SOS UK, from whom we were derived from, and a team of 92 amazing members, including campaign coordinators, support staff, and volunteers. This is a clear display of the mass grassroots support that is behind the education around climate in schools, and making it very clear to the government that a new nature GCSE or brief syllabus in STEM and geography is not enough. We need to frame the climate emergency as a social, political, and cultural issue, as well as an environmental one. We believe that climate education must be woven through every available subject, as it will affect every part of society. From the 7 asks we had a year and a half ago, we now function under 5 core principles for our campaigning. We want students to be taught about climate change and sustainability, as these crises need to be key content in all subject areas. Educators to be training in how to teach about these topics effectively. Vocational courses in sustainable areas to allow for a just transition and maintenance of green industry, as well as a golden thread of climate education in every discipline, as climate change is and will continue to affect everyone. A carbon neutral estate through retrofitting and new building standards, and increased sustainable practice on campuses to provide an inspirational and exemplar learning environment. I am now going to pass on to our next. I'm now going to pass back to Jamie.
Thank you so much, B, for that great introduction to Teach the Future. Now I'm going to hand over to Joe and Eleanor to present some brand new research and outline some incredibly illuminating statistics about the current state of climate education in the UK. Also, if you'd like to tweet about this event, please do, and tag us at _teachthefuture. We can make sure to share.
So we'll just get a minute to get the slides up, and they should be appearing any minute now. Hi, so I'm Eleanor, I'm 18, I am from Devon, and I've been Teach the Future for almost a year now. And so once again, I'd really like to thank you for coming today. 14,000 signatures is amazing, but also we're here today to launch our new research into teacher attitudes about the current state and the future of climate education. I'd like to say now that we shall be taking questions as we go along this part of the presentation. So if you have any quick questions directly related to the statistics we're talking about, then please send them in. We'll answer a couple at a time, hopefully. So yeah, what is the research that we have done? So previously in our campaign, we had been using some research that had been carried out by Oxfam in 2019, but we wanted to update this with a bigger sample size and to ask some questions that were specific to our campaign. And so there were 4 main questions that we wanted to understand. Have teachers been trained to teach about climate change? How often is climate change taught? When is climate change taught? And how do teachers think that they could teach climate change in a way that would be interesting to their students? Now, we think this research is really important because it helps us not only evidence our asks to government, but also to understand what solutions are needed and how we can move forward in achieving them. So the research itself consisted of a question on the app Teacher Tap. I know some of you in the audience who are teachers have possibly answered it. And so this asked what training teachers have had on climate education, and then a longer survey by opinion. As well as this, we asked some of our own teachers or teachers we had connections to about how they felt about climate education to get a more detailed understanding of our teachers' views on this. So our first big statistic, the headline statistic from Teacher Tap, so this was from 7,682 respondents, is that 70% of teachers feel they have not received adequate training on any aspects of climate change. This statistic was the same throughout all nations that were tested. And so the question itself was, do you feel you've received adequate training to educate students on climate change, its implications for the environment and societies around the world, and how these implications can be addressed? Now, we thought it really important to frame this issue, frame the question in this way, because climate change is a really complex issue that currently is confined to STEM subjects or geography. And this is something that we'll talk about later with some of our other stats. But often people frame it as just the environment and not as societies as well, and the implications on the whole. And so this statistic is really important to show that actually we can't be moving forwards with climate education without further training. And so the 70% shows just how vital our campaign is. And so to look at some views that teachers have, a physical education teacher from secondary school said, we all need to understand diversity and the importance which climate change has within our society. So should we all be able to be comfortable speaking about the climate and the importance of certain choices and actions? I believe that teachers of any subject should receive training to help them guide and inform, as well as promote students to take more ownership. Thank you. And so if there are any questions now, about that one statistic. And if not, I shall be moving on to Joe for the next one.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we have any questions yet, but please, as we're going, send in questions about the stats we've shown you using the Q&A tab.
Sorry, Joe. We might miss them if you put them in chat, but you should be able to use the Q&A function.
Yeah, Edred says, what was the size of the study? And we've got two different surveys here, but that one was a sample size of, let me get the exact number, 7,682. Yeah, exactly. So yeah. Okay, so the next few questions come from Opinion. They have a smaller but still representative sample size, and this survey was carried out from October to November in 2020. So it's a sample size of 503 teachers, and they answered a variety of questions. As Eleanor said, one of the first things we wanted to find out is how often is climate change taught? So we get 4 options for this question: and never mentioned, rarely mentioned, and not taught outside of the compulsory curriculum. Often mentioned, but taught in the the curriculum, and it's also been a topic of other class assemblies. So I think this is kind of an okay point for a school to be at. But then the desirable place for all schools, the kind of the aim that we want in Teach the Future, is for climate change to become integral to many different aspects of the curriculum and teaching. So what you can see here is that a total of 41% of teachers say climate change is never or rarely mentioned in their schools, which is really, really shocking. With climate change being such a key defining issue of our generation and of our time, that's really, really disastrous. And only 5% of teachers think their school is in that, what we're calling the desirable place to be, that climate change will be integral to many different aspects of teaching and learning. Only 5%, and that really needs to be significantly higher. I'll see if there are any questions now. Yeah, Dan is asking about primary and secondary. So it does differ a bit by primary and secondary. I don't have the numbers on me right now, but you can see the full stats on the Teach the Future website. Someone will put the link in chat now, and through that you'll be able to break it down by primary and secondary. And Mick says, were private schools included in the surveys? They were, but the results are weighted to reflect teachers across the UK. So I had an equal weighting of primary, secondary, state, and also weighted based on Ofsted ratings and regions. So it was really well weighted, so we can know it's accurate to represent all teachers in the UK. Cool, over to Eleanor.
Thank you. And so the next question we look at is, when is climate change mentioned? And so this is in terms of subjects, or I'm sorry, this is the same question. Yeah, sorry. So when is climate change mentioned? And so this is in terms of subjects. And so here we see that it's hugely limited to science and geography. And we find that's quite problematic because it silos all this information and knowledge and preparation for the future into a few subjects that not everyone is taking and not everyone will be good at either. And this has very much been my experience as well. Education around climate has really excluded people whose strengths aren't in science. And it's really important that we understand climate change through other subjects such as English and drama and music and art, because we as humans understand so much better through storytelling than we do just through facts and statistics alone, which is why it's so important that it be taught through languages as well. And so yes, even when you just look at core subjects, only 17% of teachers were reporting that their schools taught climate change in subjects other than science and geography. So this including core subjects are maths, literacy, and modern languages. And so 17% is really low when it's so critical to so many parts of our lives. And then another part we looked at is it a part of problem-based learning? Because one of the ways that it could be taught is through a problem-based learning approach, which would allow students to confront these issues in groups to come up with their own solutions to them. And this has really good potential to combat climate change education, as it's an open-ended question without one set answer. And so it would encourage students to tackle the problem with their own critical thinking. And this would also make it a key part of cross-curriculum learning. But we found that currently it's thought that only 7% of schools are implementing this, which just seems like a huge wasted opportunity. And so another teacher, Charlotte Cavallaro, who's a geography teacher, said that at present awareness of the importance of the issue in classrooms is too often limited to geography and science. School-wide initiatives must become the norm. Young people should be educated in sustainable buildings by informed adults who are the example for young people to follow. Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah, we had a question. sorry, I just lost it. Did teachers give suggestions about how there could be more training for them and other school staff?
I don't believe they did. There are a few open-ended questions that allowed space for teachers to describe themselves how it was implemented in their schools, but I don't think for the teacher training question there was one question about what can the government do to support teachers, I believe, or what resources they need, but not so much in terms of training. No.
Yeah. We generally say in Teach the Future, we want teachers to be trained as part of continued professional development, like they have on Inset Days, for example, but also for them to be given really better resources by the Department for Education. And one of our asks is for the creation of a climate change information institute that would be able to put together amazing resources and work with scientists to get together amazing resources for teachers and everyone else in the country so they can teach about and learn about climate change.
Yeah, one of our key asks for the campaign in England is a review into the current education system. So hopefully were this to be implemented, then it would bring up some answers to the questions like how can teachers be trained on climate change?
Yeah. Another question was, sorry, I see a lot of questions here. Someone said those stats, particularly the 41% rarely or ever teaching about climate change, are horrendous. Why do you think the numbers are so bad? I think part of it comes from the fact that the curriculum isn't updated too frequently, but when it most recently has been updated, the government decided to kind of take away some aspects that were deemed like political. And that includes climate change, even though this is such an essential issue. The government decided that that was not a priority, not something teachers should be teaching students about. Another question is, there's no mention of RE yet. That should be a way into the issues too, and definitely RE or religious education, religious studies is really, really important to this. And obviously the ethics around climate change and the justice elements to it are really, really important. The next question that we wanted to find out is how teachers feel they could teach climate change, because we recognize it's obviously when they teach it, like in what subject it's being taught. There's also the element of within those subjects, how is it being taught? So we ask teachers, thinking about the way you teach, in which ways could you frame climate change in a way that seems most interesting to your students? And you can see here that animals, nature and wildlife is at 64%. So the majority of teachers feel they could frame it around that. And same with health, food and well-being, 55%. So majority, but still a slim majority feel they could frame it around those issues, which are obviously really important. But I've got some lines here to three other areas: local community, careers and green jobs, and politics, economics and foreign policy. These are three also really, really important ways for climate change to be framed, because that's some of the most, I guess, tangible real world implications on climate change for the students that we're talking about here. We need to be preparing young people to go into green jobs, and that means teachers need to be able to frame it around that. The solutions to climate change are largely, or largely include political solutions. So climate change needs to be taught in a political context. And one thing we found is that a lot of teachers are scared to do this because they don't want to be seen as coming across as politically biased. So it needs to be a better framework for teachers to be able to teach about that without coming across as politically biased or fearing they might do. And then local community is obviously really important for many reasons. It allows us to understand the effects that climate change is going to have on us and the solutions that we can contribute to around us. But I think also it will allow students to understand how climate change affects people more if they can see it mapped out in their local communities. So yeah, 25%, only 25% say they could frame it in terms of green jobs, and only 11% say they could frame it in terms of politics, which is really low. And a brilliant quote from one of our teachers that goes along with that really well. I believe it is critical that climate change is a common thread through the curriculum, not just in science and geography, but in food science, RE, maths, English and art. Therefore, Climate education for teachers is essential so they have the confidence to broach the subject accurately and avoid the pitfalls and support their students sensitively. And that is exactly what we want in Teach the Future. Should we take some more questions now? I haven't had a chance to see if there are any related to the research. Nick Nuttall has a really interesting question. Did the survey have a look at civic engagement? A lot of people say it should be woven across the curriculum for sure, but also backed up by real life civic experience, tree planting, restoring river systems, putting solar panels on the roof of schools, etc. That's a great question. It's not something we asked about, to be honest. We only had a limited number of questions, but it is something we've looked at in Teach the Future. And one of our key asks, I think in all of the nations, but certainly in England, is for funding for youth-led social action or youth-led social environmental action, which is exactly that kind of thing, tree planting and that kind of thing. And we think the government should open up a fund that would allow students and schools to engage in that. So that's definitely something we're interested in. Someone has said, do we need political change to make this happen? And the answer is definitely yes. We've got some asks for the government in each of the in Scotland, England, and Wales, and you can check them out by going to our website. Someone will put the link in chat. We'll take one more question. Paul Turner says, how can we avoid a move to ego-fascism and focus on techno fixes rather than teaching fundamental structural problems which are causing climate breakdown? And answer to that, I think this one's kind of already been touched on, but we need to make sure that climate change isn't taught as just a technical or environmental issue, but it needs to go beyond and taught as a social, political, cultural issue, and all of that. Okay, so based on the results of this research, and we'll be having more questions later, by the way, and thanks everyone for listening to this. Based on those statistics we've shown you, which I think you'll probably agree are quite shocking. I think for me, the most shocking one is probably the 41% of schools never or rarely mention climate change. I assumed it was higher than that, so it was really worrying. So our recommendations, it's clear to us that currently climate change is only consistently mentioned in science or geography, and we need to move away from this framing of climate change as just an issue for scientists or geographers, but it's going to affect all aspects of everyone's lives. Linking it to citizenship, green jobs, politics, and local communities is essential to ensuring students are adequately prepared for their futures. However, majority of teachers say they couldn't do this in a way that would seem most interesting to students. So in order to fully embed climate change within the curriculum, which is what we want in Teach the Future, we need all teachers to be trained to talk about the climate crisis in a way that's relevant to their subjects and their students' lives, but also in a way that empowers their students rather than frightening them. One final quote from one of the teachers that we interviewed. This is the world they're growing up in, and they will inherit the challenges that come with that world. Being educated early on the issues and the solutions gives them a better understanding of the reality of those issues, but also empowers them to get involved with current solutions. You can see the full research at teachthefuture.uk/teacher-research. Please continue to put your questions and comments in the chat. It's really great to see that. It'd be great if you could share the research, particularly if you're part of an organization. But just share it on your personal accounts. There are links to share it on this web page here, and it'd be amazing if everyone could do that. We want to get this heard as far and wide as possible. Thank you so much. I think passing back to Jamie now. Jamie?
Yes, sorry. So thank you very much, Joe and Eleanor, for that fantastic presentation. And thank you to everyone who supported with the development of that research over the last few months. I'm now going to hand over to Larissa Kennedy, who's the National President of the National Union of Students and the President of Students Organising Sustainability UK, one of Teach the Future's parent organisations, to reflect on that research and what it means. Larissa.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you to all the folks involved in Teach the Future for the invite and for having me. And honestly, can I just get a virtual wow for everything that Teach the Future has done over the past few months? Honestly, you folks are absolutely smashing it and really leading the way in transformative work that is seeking to uproot a lot of those systemic barriers to students and young people recognizing themselves as agents of change. And it's just honestly a joy and a privilege to see this work in action. And I think just reflecting on some of the conversations there, I was thinking really at the crux of this is a collective understanding of the power that education has as a tool of liberation, a tool through which we can radically reimagine the world around us. And in this case, where we can imagine a world committed to ending the social, political, cultural ways that climate breakdown is sewn into the fabric of our society, and envisioning a world that takes climate justice seriously. And that's really exciting. Actually, not long before this call, I was on another call with an academic called Dr. Oliver Escobar, and he works on participatory and deliberative democracy and focuses on political inequalities and that kind of thing. And one of the things that he just said really stuck with me in relation to what we're talking about here. And he said that apathy is not natural to us as people, it's produced. And right now we have an education system that, despite amazing teachers' best efforts, systematically produces apathy to a lot of the things happening to us, because for generations, young people, students, we've been told that we don't have agency. We've been told that change happens outside of us by someone else, someone older than us, someone more experienced, someone over there. They can stand up, they can do that thing. And you know, these have obviously been entrenched, these thoughts and feelings have been entrenched through things like academization and other forms kind of expansive approach to education. In fact, in many ways, education has become this kind of factory that we're just expected to pass through in some path that has been set for us year after year, becoming cogs in a wheel, rather than having those empowering experiences that teach us to poke holes in what we've been taught to accept as possible, and empowering us to really re-envision the world around us. And again, I was thinking about quotes and stuff and people, things that I've said, and I remember someone once telling me that Mark Twain once said something to the effect of, "Don't let your schooling interfere with your education." And I remember at the time being like, what? But I think often we see the gaps in what we see in the curriculum, the gaps in what we're taught to think are the important things to know, often preclude us from accessing those broader things, those things that make us feel like part of a community, those things that really get us excited about changing the world. And I firmly believe that through the work that Teach the Future is doing, we're conceptualizing a form of schooling that is truly educational, right? In the broadest sense of the word. It's about a curriculum that would help students find their linchpin. And I say linchpin because my good friend and campaigner, Arafat Nassim, refers to your linchpin as the thing that connects what angers you, what's infuriating you, the thing that you want to change with what you're really good at and with what you enjoy. And it's only by seeing climate and climate justice and climate education as something that cuts across everything that we're taught and everything that we talk about, that people will be able to find that linchpin. Because for some folks, that linchpin might come up in English, for others it might come up in drama, for others it might come up in history, and yes, for some it may come up in geography, but that's not the only place. So I'm really, really excited about the idea that we can help people find their linchpin, find the way, the kind of key through which they unlock their role in bringing about climate justice. So I want you to dream with me for a minute. Don't fall asleep on me, but dream with me for a minute. Imagine an education system where an understanding of climate breakdown exists across all those subjects, all those topics. Imagine a world where every student, every young person recognizes their agency, where everyone sees the role that they can play in changing the world, in ending climate breakdown, in bringing about climate justice. Imagine a world where we don't even have to campaign for this because we've brought it to light. That is the world that Teach the Future is willing into existence, one event at a time, one petition at a time, one signature at a time even. And this is a beautiful process. It's students, young people taking the energy, the excitement they feel about the world that they could bring about, to hand that to other people. It's passing that ladder down, seeing that the process you've been through of seeing the opportunities to change things, of seeing what is possible, is something that you want for everyone. And that's just a powerful concept in and of itself. So honestly, I'm really flattered to be even a small part of this event, because as I said at the beginning, Teach the Future is really, really smashing it. And I just think that, you know, as allies of this movement, for the teachers, for other folks on this call, you have so much power in shaping folks and how they see themselves as part of the broader world. You have so much power in giving people agency to feel like they can make a difference. And there is nothing more important than people feeling like anything they do, they can speak, whether it's speaking, whether it's writing, whether it's putting on a play, whether it's doing an experiment, whatever it is, whatever that thing that clicks for them is and that connects them to what's important is, that has value and that is valid. So I guess my core contribution here, or I hope my core contribution here, is just to reaffirm how crucial this is, not only to climate justice, not only to ending climate change and climate breakdown, but to actually re-envisioning the whole system, to re-envisioning education as a whole, and thinking about the role that it plays in our society. And that is truly, truly important work. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk for too long because I think I'm probably the least important person on this stage. There are so many amazing organizers up here who are really doing the work. But I think just recognizing that when we transform our education system, we transform our society, because we set people up differently, right? We set people up to see themselves differently. We set people up to recognize that a different world is possible. And so when we're seeing the kind of sparks of organizing, be that around rent strikes, be that around climate, be that around anti-racism, whatever it is, that's because someone taught them that they have the power to change the world. No one wakes up and is just like, oh, I'm gonna change everything tomorrow. It's because someone made you feel like, or something made you feel like you were able to do that. And I think for every person here, doing that for one more person, and let's just keep that ripple effect going, because honestly, that's where it's at. That is where it's at. That's what I believe in anyway. So as I say, I mean, I think I'm gonna close off pretty soon, but I just want to say that this campaign is so gets us to question, like, what do we want the world of even creating or willing climate justice into existence to look like? Who do we want to be leading in that? And by really transforming our education system, we're saying, we affirm that we want young people to be leading that. We affirm that we want students to be leading that. We affirm that everyone, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, it doesn't matter what your interests are, it doesn't matter which subjects matter to you most, it doesn't matter what grades you got, all of you in your own way can change the world. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for the work of this campaign and for the organising that you're doing. These statistics, the research is so powerful in making the case for this kind of transformative work. And yeah, as I say, just really excited to be a very small part of the event today.
Thank you so much, Larissa, for that and for making the time in your busy schedule to be here today and support our campaign in this event. Now for some reflections from Teach the Future and insight into what's next for our campaign and how you can support us. I'm going to hand over to another one of Teach the Future's campaigners, Lily.
Thanks. Many do not currently see climate change as the issue of now, but more of an issue of the future that will have to be dealt with by the next generation. This is usually because they are fortunate enough not to have felt the effects of the ongoing climate emergency or do not understand it, which is why the Teach the Future campaign's so resilient for climate education. As well as the fact that many young people believe in and want to fight against climate change, but feel uneducated or unable to make a difference. However, there is more to climate activism than action and education: justice. Climate justice is framing the ecological crisis as a political and social issue, rather than being limited to a more scientific perspective. Here at Teach the Future, we've been working hard to include climate justice in every decision we make, be that considering the ethics of a potential supporting organisation or writing blogs to diminish the ambiguity of the subject, as well as the prioritisation of this within our asks and calls upon the government on the UK. Climate justice is essential. We must recognise that climate change will further increase the current social global disparities and affect every aspect of our society, not just the environment that we live in, but also the speed and exaggeration that impacts on marginalised communities and humans as a whole. This is why we can no longer just cover the siloed areas of geography or science, but we must weave it like a golden thread through every available subject. Climate affects all aspects of life, and it should be treated as such. Whether that's the food technology and the harmful effects of animal agriculture industry, or photography with sustainability of film, or history to discuss how colonialism has fueled the disproportionate impact on climate change on those in marginalised groups and nations in the global south. With this in mind, many people may agree that these social inequalities exist, but feel unsure of how to help. But you don't have to feel helpless. There are multiple ways you can help us as a campaign and a global cause as a whole, including signing a petition if you haven't already done so, writing to your member of the Parliament, member of the Scottish Parliament, member of the Senate, or member of the Legislative Assembly, and asking them to support climate education. You can do this on our website. But looking to the coming months of our campaign, we are planning two election campaigns in Wales and Scotland, centralising around a week of action in April. The week of action will involve banner drops and projections across the UK, and we hope that this will bring to light the importance of climate education everywhere. With this being the first election in Wales where 16 and 17-year-olds have been given the right to vote, the Teach the Future Wales team have been working in collaboration with parent organisations to build momentum around voter registration. Alongside this, they plan to gain grassroots support to increase voting intentions towards that of climate education for local publicity and action work, as well as calling on candidates to pledge to support their asks if elected to the Senate. The Scotland team have been organising hustling events in the 8 electoral regions in Scotland. These events involve 3 students from each local area asking questions to MSP candidates. Our 4th one is happening on Friday in the Highlands and Islands. And as well as the Wales team, they have also been focusing on gaining grassroots support across Scotland. With our England group having local elections in May 2021, they are organising around encouraging councils and metro mayoral candidates to lobby internally with their own parties and on their councils with versions of their asks, and campaigning alongside the campaigns in Wales and Scotland, so that together we can build grassroots support across the UK. So this research is so important to our campaign, as we can't empower students without teachers knowing how to teach about climate change in a way that is relevant and linked to their subject. Climate affects all aspects of life and should be treated as such. As well as this, we frequently get responses from MPs and those who don't support that climate change is already taught in geography and science. But this research shows that even this is not always the case. Only 65% of schools teach it in science and 63% in geography. Having this information that we have gathered strengthens our calls to the governments across the UK. Because climate education is needed now, because today's 4-year-olds will be 18 in 2025, and that may seem long now, but it's really not. So as you can tell, we have much planned for the future, and we hope that this can lead to us becoming one step closer to achieving our asks and ensuring that climate education is implemented across the whole of the UK. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lily, for that. There's certainly a lot of really exciting stuff going on at the moment and coming up at Teach the Future over the next few months. I'm so excited to be a part of that. We've now come to the end of the formal speeches and now going to move to a bit of a Q&A session. So if you've got any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and then Joe and myself are then going to ask them to students on the panel. So just have a look at the questions. Okay, so the first question, just wait for the panel to turn on their video. Perfect. Okay, so the first question is, what is the best route to get this through to teacher training settings? Does anyone want to answer that?
I think I touched on this briefly during the presentation, but well, first ask in the UK, in England that is for a review of the current education system to look at how climate can be addressed within education as it is currently. And so this shall hopefully bring up where there is need for more training, and shall hopefully look at how to implement that training. We've also been in discussion with some people who conduct at the University of Manchester. We've spoken at a couple of events there for teachers who are currently in training, and so I know that there are events set up and being set up for more informal training sessions, or just webinars and events for trainee teachers to begin discussing this. And so there's some work being done, but not at a required or mandatory level. It's largely so far based on teacher interests. But those are the two ways that there are currently.
Thanks. The next question comes from Nick Nuttall from Earth Day. He says that our report clearly points to failure of the UK government, and asks what work is being done globally on this, or more, are we optimistic that at COP26 climate change will be a key talking point? And he plugged Earth Day's open letter calling for climate education to become mandatory across the world. So check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, are you guys optimistic that the UK government and other governments are going to listen and talk about climate education at COP26?
I think this is a really key opportunity for our government to kind of be able to show to other world leaders and governments that they kind of are doing things that will kind of progress climate action and reduce global warming. So I think it would be a really sensible and great opportunity for them to be able to kind of display to the world that they are doing something that isn't being done in mainstream education anywhere else in the world, and kind of trigger that domino effect for that to be able to kind of occur in other education systems and not just our own. So yeah, I'd like to say I'm optimistic that they will do that, because it kind of gives them an opportunity to be able to show other world leaders that they are doing something that others are not.
Thank you, Charlie. Another question that we've got is, the curriculum in all schools is already so crowded and rushed. How do we convince head teachers to make time? I think, Charlie, you were going to take that one as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important to mention that obviously climate change is indiscriminate, and although the climate crisis does disproportionately impact those in marginalised communities, it will affect us all at kind of differing rates and in differing ways, and it's kind of unpredictable to kind of put that along a timeline for who will be affected when. But we know that the whole point of education is to prepare us for our futures and to be able to go on into our future lives, once we become adults. And I think that one really key point that we need to hit home to the government and head teachers and proprietors and kind of independent schools is that if we really want to be fulfilling kind of the entire point, the very definition of education itself, then we should be teaching young people about the climate crisis and the skills that they will need to be able to create and maintain a sustainable and green society, because every subject that they take in school will link and lead into an industry they will inevitably enter once they kind of leave school, whether that be in a STEM or geographical field as it's currently taught, or in any other subject, whether that's not in mainstream education and going through a more vocational stream, or in any other subject that kind of it's not already taught in. So I think really making sure that we broaden our ability to be able to prepare young people as much as possible for their futures, and ensuring that we are kind of carrying out our duties to be able to give young people and people across the world who are currently being affected the best chance of being able to mitigate the climate crisis.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Next, Lily, a question for you is, what do you think should be happening in primary schools?
I think primary schools is one of the areas that it's a lot more easier to implement climate education in. Personally, when I was in primary school, it was one of the areas that it was done quite well due to a lot of hands-on activities, especially in kind of science lessons. And since there's such a broad curriculum across, for me in Scotland, it was 7 years, there's many different ways and aspects that it can be fitted in and kind of integrated throughout the subject, since it's not as narrow compared to secondary school teaching.
Our next question is for B, and that's, is teaching climate change presented as connected to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals?
I think absolutely, completely. At my school, there is a big emphasis on the UN sustainability and climate goals. I think it's obviously very important. I cannot remember every single one off the top of my head, which I'm sure my teachers would be ashamed of. But we can't limit ourselves to that. I think it's amazing to have every single goal set out so clearly. But I think they're all so interlinked and just so important equally, that we need to think about it as a general problem, as well as approaching that problem in the different areas.
Thank you, B. That is amazing. Our next question, just want to say we have we've had like 50 questions asked and we have 10 minutes left. So we're obviously not going to get through every question. If you have any questions after this about Teach the Future or what we're doing, you can email us at hello@teachthefuture.uk and we'll get back to you in around a week, hopefully. The next question is, have we approached head teachers about making their schools more sustainable? Anyone want to take that?
So at Teach the Future, we've mainly been focusing on governmental lobbying and kind of bringing around systemic change. But as individuals, each of us are kind of active in other organisations in our local areas. I know that some members of our team have been working in their schools and as part of eco-councils to kind of bring around increased sustainable action on their school campuses and university campuses. And our parent organisations, obviously SOS UK, have been doing lots of work around the decarbonisation and divestment of fossil fuels from universities. So we've kind of got links in lots of different areas that we're kind of really pushing for, and that's definitely an area that we're looking into working in more specifically, with Wales having one of their asks as being sustainable school campuses and increased sustainable provision of kind of actions and resources on schools.
Thank you, Charlie, for that. Another question that we've had is, did the challenges of teaching about environmental justice figure in the research? Eleanor, do you want to maybe do that one?
So one of the problems surrounding people's understanding of climate justice is that currently no one does. There's so little education within our system, as it's siloed into just science and currently happening, and then a little bit into geography, which is almost exclusively, in my experience, about weather patterns and not actually the impact on people's lives. And I think there's a lot of work that can be done in climate justice. And so with our framing of the questions, I know there's one that I read out that was asking, that specifies what type of training they had had, and not just was it environmental, but did the training teach them about how it impacted people's lives and societies? And so our framing of the questions were hopefully to get to the point that climate justice can't be fought for unless people understand that the climate crisis impacts so much more than just the environment. And so hopefully if climate education is spread across all of the subjects and not just science and geography, then we shall be able to fight for climate justice so much more, because people will understand the intersectionality of the issue. And so while we didn't have any questions specifically on climate justice, it is integral to our campaign. And so we hope that it is represented through the questions that we did ask, as some of the aspects of implementing climate were touched upon in those questions.
Thanks, Eleanor. The next question is for Larissa. We've talked about school teachers, but what about university lecturers? What are the changes that need to happen at university? Idra says that they're a university student and deeply frustrated with the lack of awareness on climate change, even from the professors. So what needs to change?
Yeah, I mean, going back to what we've all been talking about, this failure to cut it across everything. I think that's not only in schools, it's in colleges, it's in universities. And I think, you know, we're trying to look at ways that we can get climate more widely recognised across the university curriculum, again, not siloed to those spaces that it's typically put in. And I think, you know, there's so much that you can do locally to push for that and really demand the climate is recognised in different subjects and in different departments in different ways, but also linking up to the work of course, Teach the Future and SOS UK in really doing that collectively and trying to get climate onto curriculum, onto your degrees and stuff. So yeah, big up university students who are kind of standing in solidarity here, but also want to make that happen for them too.
Thank you, Larissa. Our next question is that the Department for Education has recently put out mandatory guidance for schools banning anti-capitalist material from the classroom. How can young people have credible discussions within climate education for a just transition without critiquing capitalism? B, I think you were going to take that one.
I think the answer is not simple for that, but you can't have credible discussions without it's bordering on censorship in a way, because you cannot solve a problem without thinking about it as a bigger picture. And maybe when we get down to it, capitalism is or isn't the problem, the main problem, or the main driver of the problem. But I think we need to be able to look at it and address it and analyze it, and not just capitalism, but just everything. We need to be able to look and understand everything, because we can't approach and solve things if we don't even get a chance to understand it. So I think hearing from everyone's perspectives, whether you think they're right or wrong, it's essential to moving forward and improving.
Charlie, I think you wanted to just add something there.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really key that we kind of allow young people and students to be able to develop their own opinions through their critical thinking skills within school settings. And obviously, capitalism is a major fiscal theory, and if we want to be able to kind of enact that systemic change that's really needed, we not only need to give young people an understanding of the intersection between social justice issues and environmental issues and where they kind of meet, but also gain the support of an intersection of society, whether they be from any aspect of the political spectrum, because we need to build mass movements and grassroots support to be able to kind of push change through legislative means. So yeah.
Cool. And a final question, this one back on our research on the teacher tap survey, which is the large one. Eleanor, how was this weighted and how demographics taken into account?
Okay, so I want to preface this by saying I am 18 while I'm hopefully going to be starting a degree next year on quantitative social sciences. I have not yet started it, so this research wasn't carried out by us, but it was commissioned by us. But we do have information about the weightings of the different demographics. So the teachers that we asked for teacher tap, I believe this was, were split into independent and state-funded schools, and also by phase, so primary and secondary school. And I think that with middle schools, they were allocated according to which year groups they teach. And they were also weighted by free school meals quartile, and as well as Ofsted rating, and I think that was all of them or most of them. Oh, and by region and how long the teachers had been teaching for. So this should hopefully account for some of the issues there. And they were weighted by people who hopefully know what they're doing because they work on this full time. I do have the exact numbers of the weighting. I don't know if you want me to read them out, but I shall stop that there because it was weighted to be representative of all UK teachers. So yeah, hopefully.
Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you to all the questions and all the people who've answered questions for that. And thanks again, everyone, for coming today and listening to our speeches and listening to us launch this really exciting research. We've sadly now come to the end of this event, but please do make sure that you keep in touch with us by following us on social media. We're at _Teach the Future on Instagram and Twitter, Teach the Future campaign on Facebook. And on Instagram, we also have pages for each nation. So at Teach the Future, ttf.england, ttf.scot, and ttf.wales. And also make sure you're signed up to our mailing list to make sure that you're the first to know about what Teach the Future is up to. I believe this has been recorded and will be posted on our YouTube and Facebook after the event. But we can send an email out once that's sorted. So all that remains to be said, I think, is a massive final thank you for coming. I hope you have a really good rest of your evening. Thank you.